Hello everybody and welcome to our third episode of the Company of Heroes 2 Masterclass Series. I say our third episode. Episode 2 is still underway at the moment because Helping Hands, his video corrupt, which is very unfortunate, but that will be coming along soon. But today we have the very, very highly esteemed player VonIvan from who's the number one North American player.
Yeah, NA man, NA, best of the best.
Pro League. And how's it going, Von?
It's going pretty good.
Good. So we've taken this replay today because this was probably one of the best games we've actually cast in King of the Hill ever. This was a really interesting game, really good fun. You're up against Carl, who had been king for so long already. So, we were wondering, could Carl be beaten today? And you did, in spectacular style, get around him. So, of course, we want to find out a little bit more about your OKW play, kind of what you intend when you go into these games, like what's your ideal build, what your starting build's like. And kind of follow you through the game. So let's get straight into it. And let's just ask, so your starting build as OKW, why no Kubel?
Because I feel you can use the Kubel to bleed USF, but the problem is it can't scale like Volksgrenadiers can. It'll usually die within like 5 to 10 minutes of the game. So if you have Volksgrenadiers, those will usually survive until the end unless you decide to throw them for some reason. Okay. So that's the biggest reason why I didn't want to go Kubel on this map.
Okay, so no advantages for you in terms of capping.
Yeah, it can give you an advantage in terms of faster capping in the early game, but I feel like I can do that almost as fast with Volksgrenadiers, and like I said, the Volksgrenadiers don't die within 10 minutes. So.
Is there anything, because when we were watching you play this and we were kind of commenting on the build that it comes, you're just building your 4th Volksgrenadier now. Why 4 Volks? Is this to do with USF and their kind of free infantry squad per teching, or is this just a map control thing?
Well, it's map control and also the fact that USF at the start, since they have no bars, their riflemen bleed really well if you position everything correctly and time your assaults well. So you can really aggressively push the cutoff of USF as long as you don't throw your units close range against riflemen.
Right, okay. So this is more about like manpower starvation right at the start of the game, which is a really interesting point, actually. We notice you're laying a very early mine here, which I don't think has been spotted. You have the range superiority there. So what's with the mine positioning?
Well, the reason I had the mine there was just in case he was trying to flank around the side, or if he was pushing his rifleman on the right-hand flank, and he decided, let me move over to the left real quick because I need to support another squad. Hopefully that would bleed his rifleman hitting the mine.
Okay, so it's almost like a trigger then, so that you know when it's going down.
Yeah, it's also like a personal flare as well, because then I'll be alerted that a squad is moving that way.
Yeah. So with OKW, we're just kind of looking. You're bringing your first SWS on the field right now, which is going to be converted into the battle grouper. Have you gone into this game with a plan for OKW, or are you just kind of playing the game, or kind of what's the build you're going for?
Usually, 90% of the time, whenever I go into a game, I have a pretty hard set plan in my mind of what I want to do and how I want to execute it.
Okay.
So for this one, I decided I wanted to go battle group headquarters to get the flak half track, because I feel the flak half track is pretty strong this patch, and it's also good in case you have to deal with planes in the late game, like P-47 or IL-2, etc.
If it lives that long.
Yeah, that's what we always pray for.
It's a good in theory, but whether or not it actually does last is a completely separate issue. Okay, so your kind of plan here for this game is for this flag half track of the battle group. Now, is this based on the fact that you're playing against USF, or is this just something that you wanted to do? You would have played it against any of the factions Kind of what's the reason that you selected to do this on this map and this game against this player?
Well, the biggest reason was because like I do go flak half track universally. I don't go mechanized anymore. Mostly because I feel the P2 is a bit too delayed for my type of aggressive gameplay. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't use the Panzer II or the Puma for mechanized. It's just it really depends on what type of strategy you want to implement and how aggressive you are overall. I feel like the flak half track is pretty good at shutting down infantry early game.
Okay, just a quick one as well. Have you spotted the Doctrine selection at this point in the game? Because we were kind of
I noticed the little eye at the top, which gives you, I think, observe mode when you're using raid tactics with the M8 Doctrine, which is recon support company.
Yeah.
So
okay,
I knew he was going to go M8s, and I was like, okay, I got to try to cut him off of the fuel as best I can so he can't just pop that out right off the bat.
Okay. I see a lot of players wouldn't see that. Do you know what I mean? Or like, I know a lot of players are like, how would you spot that? It's kind of like, so we do just want to point out like the symbols will come above the heads of the units there, which was the eye, and that kind of, you know, you can relate that instantly to a commander choice. So you now have an advantage of knowledge, and you have kind of a confident way of picking your own. You kind of know what Carl can bring onto the field at any point. So do you have any thoughts in mind for commander picks off the bat, or are you just still kind of playing to see how it goes?
Well, at first I was thinking of playing to see how it goes, because I was going to decide between either Fallschirmjägers or Fortifications Doctrine. The Fallschirmjägers if I wanted to wipe an important squad on retreat, if possible, or if I needed it for that extra unit on the field if I lost Volksgrenadier. But as you can see, I haven't lost any important units so far, so I think I decided on doing Fortifications Doctrine, which actually really helped out in the end because it allowed me to do a couple of things you'll see.
Hashtag no spoilers for those who haven't seen it live on King of the Hill. Great takedown of that M20, by the way. So a little bit of a dance going on there. And
yeah,
I think
Carl was playing the Benny the Hill theme while that was going on around the corner.
He's I think he played that well, to be honest, because he managed to get obviously the vehicle crew out with the bazooka, so he kind of got a lot from that. Just having a look at the map control at the moment. So this game started off, I mean, it was all over the place. You were capping each other's sides of territories. You were doing very, very deep cut-offs to each other, which was really good and it was really interesting. But you're obviously triple capped at the start of the game. You don't prioritize VPs by the looks of it. You seem to be prioritizing resources, and is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I'm more of a resource guy because I don't I like to get armor out as quickly as I can because it's just a huge advantage on the field because you can bleed your opponent so well with armor as soon as you can get it before he can. So, I mean, it depends, because I notice with high-level players, they'll either be really VP aggressive, like Carl is here, and others such as Nagano and Loveness, or they'll be more resource aggressive, like myself and Von Aston and Theo, etc. Because it really depends on what you want to do. Like, if you're playing a more long, I guess, scaled game in your mind, you want to be able to have that VP advantage so you can hopefully survive longer in the game and also cause your opponent to have to go for the VP later on instead of actual resources, flanking, etc.
So I mean, this just comes down, I guess, to your aggressive play style, is that you need to kind of fuel those units to be on the game for you to play with and have those big advantage windows. But it's interesting
I'm all about
to hear
timing with those resources.
It's interesting to hear that you kind of know the profiles of other players, which I really like, because Company of Heroes, there's not enough of this goes on in the game. I guess like the top kind of players, they're playing against each other a lot. They'll pick up on these kind of things, and but there isn't enough of kind of knowledge of the top players and what they do. It's really interesting to point out that you kind of know who is VP focused and who is resource focused. So Carl here, you believe to be VP focused. You are of course triple capping him now, so double bonus for you. But we see that you're about to bring out your next SWS, and at the moment, so tell us about your choice here and where you're going with OKW at the moment, because you're in a great position right now.
Well, as OKW, like 99% of the time, I'm always interested in getting a Panzer IV out as quickly as I can, because that unit's huge and being able to counter medium vehicles and infantry at the same time, compared to like saving for a Panther or going for a Yake Panzer, which is only anti-armor, which there's no reason for if you have the resource advantage over your opponent.
So, I mean, Panzer IV is that kind of choice just because it counters everything, and that's what you're going for. The decision to put your Tier 4 on this side of the map as well, I found this really interesting, and I mean, what was the reason for this? Because, I mean, it serves you very well, but it's just very, very unusual to see Tier 4.
Yeah, usually people would like to put their Schwer on the other side of the map where they're not pushing with most of their units. But in my mind, like originally at the start of the game, I was going to push to the left-hand side of the map, but then I thought to myself, it's a bit of a pain because, you know, there's also the retreat path, which is by a red cover road, which you can take more damage if your opponent's pushing your cutoff there. Whereas if which is, you know, a little bit closer where his fuel is, I mean, you've got the green cover on your side there. If you defend it, you can build sandbags. The red cover road isn't like right by your base, etc. So if he is flanking real close, you won't take more damage on retreat.
Yeah.
And the biggest reason is like I put the Schwer on my side because I thought to myself, well, if he's trying to chase units on retreat, where I'm pushing my units from, and they're going to retreat to the right-hand side, I might as well have the Schwer there just to defend them so they don't get insta-wipe.
Okay, interesting point. So I think we just saw the Greyhound was there. Greyhound gives a little bit of a chase here, which I really liked, and I think this was a little unfortunate because you hadn't reversed over the mine you'd planted. I kind of thought that was
trying to like reverse into that mine, but then the 50 cal was there, so I was like, oh shit, I don't want to lose, you know, the Schwer, and I didn't have like any bulks instantly there as well, so the M8 would be able to just backtrack eventually. So I was like, oh crap, I gotta take the long way. So
yeah, it was unfortunate. Now, of course, without that, you're kind of losing your the kind of suppression grip, because before you had that really big suppression area from it.
It is a very, very important unit as OKW, because without that unit, until you have a Panzer IV, you are at a bit of a disadvantage, because the USF now only has light armor on the field to bleed you out, but he also has MGs now, which can easily suppress you, etc. So,
yeah,
you know, it becomes a downhill battle if you can't get the armor out to counter him.
It's a nice Faust here, so nice with the Greyhound. Would say maybe, I mean, answer me this actually, you probably experience this a lot more than I do. Do those Fausts normally, what's the odds that they actually just don't pass through the building? Do you?
Well, around the corner of a building, it's usually like I've noticed more of a 50-50 chance,
Right.
since I don't have those building engagements all the time where I'm Fausting, but whenever I have had them in the past, it's like been 50-50 for me.
Right, I see.
So sometimes it might like hit the building inside or the road to the right of the building, and it won't be able to like go through the building or curve around the building to get to the vehicle.
By the way, I was loving the cluster bombs there. They're really good. And then this Tier 4, of course, taking down the AA half track, which is a really big moment. And
yeah,
obviously,
I was like, oh, thank God, because that AA half track was giving me hell up until that point. I was like, this is such a pain to deal with, and this Raketten Warfare isn't doing the job here.
I can kind of imagine you playing this and be like, oh, pro skills, you know?
Yeah, MOG kill right there. Skill there. Back in the game.
This is top 10 NA plays. Static emplacement there. But nevertheless, I mean, that's the good thing about the positioning, was that it wasn't expected. And you could tell the Carl didn't expect that. And it had a very, very good result from it. So really nice there. So VPs at the moment were kind of locked down. Still no commander choice at 10 CPs. And I just want to ask you, because a lot of commanders and things, so I noticed you've gone in with this build order for OKW, and you said that you at the start of the game you wanted to build battle grouper, flag half track, but you haven't gone in with a commander pick, and you haven't made use of anything within the first 10 CPs. So what's your commander picking style like, and you know, and when do you decide to use one, and how do you decide to use one?
Well, what goes through my thinking process is what would be most useful in the situation I'm currently having at, versus my opponent at like the midpoint of a game between them. Like if I feel I'm lacking infantry in terms of getting Fallschirmjägers on the field to flank around and take out MGs, etc., then I'll call in the Fallschirmjägers to support. Or if I think to myself, well, this might be a good map to put a howitzer on because I can actually reach his base from this point, and Pack 43 can actually be put down on certain sections since there's hedgerows to cover it. If your opponent doesn't notice it right off the bat, I could insta-wipe armor with its two-shot ability. So it really depends on what would be more efficient to utilize by the midpoint of the game if I'm up against somebody of very similar skill.
Okay. I mean, cause I ask a lot of players this, and because we get a variety of players. Some people pick their commanders right at the start of the game. They know.
I do that sometimes as well. If like it's a map where I think this commander literally would be the only one that'll work for that map.
Okay.
So it's not always like waiting until to pick it. It's like I'd say 70% of the time it's me picking it right off the bat, and 30% is me just being cautious and seeing what I gotta pick versus my opponent.
So does this indicate a level of respect for Carl then?
Yes, I have played Carl many times in auto match, so I know his power level is pretty equal to mine or higher at times. So I try to be a little more cautious versus him.
Quite a compliment.
But yeah, he's rank 1 in a couple of factions, so he knows what he's doing.
I mean, funnily enough, though, I mean, he has got a lot on the field right now.
Yeah, he was super heavy with his infantry spam. Like, I was like, oh crap. But somehow I was still able to hold a lot of the map through this infantry horde he was collecting.
Well, that was really the interesting thing. I mean, at the moment, he's got 3 MGs, so he's got total lockdown versus your 4 Volks. He's got 3 riflemen, lieutenant, and paratroopers, and I'm thinking to myself, how on earth has he not managed to break through 4 Volks and a Raketten? Do you know what I mean?
It's all about like positioning, timing, making sure you're not going in right as he's sending out all of his infantry on a push. And also the biggest thing is just armor. As soon as you have that P4 hit the field, you can shut down any infantry flanks and pushes that are going on from every side because you have such mobile support with it.
So we've just had a big unit come up in the build at the moment. We see that the LEFH artillery is being built. So you picked your commander, Fortifications, Doctrine. You've already explained a few of the reasons for that. But why are you building the artillery now with the kind of... I want to say you're off balance with your opponent in terms of manpower, but you, as you said, have the armor advantage. Why the LEFH now?
Well, I was thinking to myself, okay, I can either go for a second P4, but if I do that, he'll just get like more AT guns out, or just wait till Jackson and then Rafa stop me. And I was like, this infantry horde and MG spam that I'm dealing with is a bit of a pain. So I was thinking, if I get a howitzer up, I could probably like maybe hopefully wipe some squads. There's ambulance in his base on retreat. And later on it actually helped a lot because it forced him not to have his retreat be at his base but like more towards the front, which is beneficial with your artillery unit because the artillery howitzer gets less accurate the larger the field is, so if it's closer to the front line.
So I mean so kind of in a way you forced him out of his base for retreat point.
I actually didn't think he would do that, but in hindsight, as soon as I saw that he was retreating, to the cutoff point, I was like, oh, okay, this could work to my advantage.
It's one of the things I really like actually about King of the Hill, because Loveness said this when he did the masterclass, was like he loves the best of one format for the tournament because it's just a chance for you to try something new and crazy and put something out there. And actually I think what a lot of people maybe learn from seeing this, those who maybe didn't already have tried this and know it already, is that it just created a pressure on the opponent where he was, every time he retreated, he constantly had to move his units, so he was extra micro back in the base all the time, just kind of hoping he didn't take that RNG hit. So it's actually a massive stress tool for Carl right now, which was really good, and you could afford it anyway, so why not? The one thing that we were worried about, of course, that you knew the Doctrine choice, and you knew these cluster bombs were here, but for some reason Carl didn't push it in this game, and I mean, do you think that was a mistake? I mean, how much do you think the artillery...
Well, the problem is with those cluster bombs, they don't necessarily wipe the actual howitzer. Sure, they wipe the crew, but you could easily just recruit with a Volksgrenadier, and he wastes over 100 plus muni with that. So I don't think he would use it unless he knew he had an advantage already, and then he just wanted to wipe the howitzer consecutively with a ton of ammo in the bank. So I think he was either A, saving up, like, because later on you'll see he saves up like 300 munitions. So maybe he was waiting until he had a better grip on the front line battles, and then he would try to push and take it out a couple times. But it doesn't necessarily wipe it completely, so I was thinking he's probably just saving up his muni for engagements where he'll just, you know, drop it on like support weapons I have, or rocket and workers, etc., or infantry on retreat.
Yeah. So I think this we see paratroopers here with the bazooka upgrade, and we're coming up to a really interesting part of the game that both you and I, apparently, we've discussed this.
Yeah,
well,
I was surprised by this.
Yeah, neither of us were aware of this. Caster's not aware of it, players not aware of it. It's one of those things because it's just so rare to really see it. I'm just going to flick over. I don't normally do this, but we will just have a look at Carl's... we'll just have a look at Carl's units for a second. So you can see the paratroopers are camouflaged at the moment, and we were kind of like, what? They can be camouflaged? And this is because of the bazooka upgrade, which is so rare to see. And this is, of course, because of the drop, isn't it? So because they're from recon support, they're going to be able to get the bazookas, and that gives them this kind of camouflage ability. So you don't know this, you're about to kind of find out, and I mean, what are your thoughts when you realize the level of AT that's just kind of erupted onto the scene?
I'm just like, oh shit, I gotta get my P4 the hell out of here before it, like, it almost died there, and if his AT gun was able to just see a bit more in terms of range, he would have easily probably got it. Yeah. Since he had a heck of a AT gun range with the USF AT gun.
It's quite, I mean, Carl's used his what's it called here, airdropped combat support. He's used it purely for anti-tank, which I think is actually really cool because, you know, he didn't go for the captain tech, and he's actually almost kind of made a double benefit out of it here because he was so heavy on infantry. By making the paratroopers also serve anti-tank, you know, he's basically got the maximum benefit in an anti-tank. Because a lot of people, I think, would go for the M19s because it's, you know, it's the only squad in the game that can wield two M1919s now.
Yeah,
which are just
but he's already got a ton of MGs, rifles, a lieutenant, and the major to call an RD as well. So I think what he was thinking is, all right, I need to get this AT gun because I'm going to be a little bit manpower sapped because I have so much infantry on the field. So I need something in terms of AT because I can't wait. Because if he waited until he had armor on the field and just relied on bazookas, that wouldn't work at all. Because I could just, you know, bleed him, pull back the P4's repair, and keep bleeding him.
So, are you using the Raketin here for spotting? Is that...
Yes, I was using it for forward scoping, because I was afraid he had, like, 2 AT guns somewhere, and I wasn't seeing the second one, so I was like,
right. So, I mean, I saw this the other day, and I just thought, it's brilliant, really, because one of the things about OKW, and I don't know how you identify with this, but OKW is, at least in my eyes, like, the stealth too. You've got tanks that can near make themselves invisible. Do you know what I mean? With veteran C, you know, the AT guns can make themselves invisible. You've got, you know, Jaeger light infantry on vet that can do the same, and I don't feel like
Jaegers and everything else.
Yeah, infrared, but I don't feel enough people are utilizing the OKW, you know, utilities well enough, because we don't see things like infrared. We don't see. Do you know what I mean? Like all the things that OKW really provides, and I think actually because of that, people think OKW is a very withdrawn and restricted faction. When actually it's just a great utility faction with some...
Yeah, I mean, it's got multi-purpose because, you know, you can get infrared where you can see everything your opponent is if you're worried about, like, AT gun placement or MG placement, etc. You have the flak half-track to shoot down planes, which is much more effective than the Oswin and the armored car and Oscar. And you've got 5-man squads compared to 4-man for Oscar as well, so they're easier to save on retreat.
It's weird because you always see Austere as the support-based army, and it's never always the case there, really. So let's have a look here. You've just called in the big Kahuna zeroing artillery. Talk me through this, Von. I wanna hear.
Alright, so I was like, alright, I need to save up for this artillery. He's gonna have a Jackson any minute now, so I just need to say fuck it. I gotta push ASAP. And I sort of botched the P4 push at first, even though it kind of worked out in the end. Because I was rushing the AT gun, but I didn't realize, you know, the RD intensifies so quickly. So my second Vet 2 P4 took damage from that RD when it dropped on the AT gun brick. So I was like, oh fuck, these are dying pretty quickly. So I was like, I gotta utilize the howitzer. So I waited until the howitzer was fully recharged, and I just aimed it right where I thought the major was with the ambulance. And that worked out pretty well because the RD not only, you know, was wiping squads in the circle, but when he was retreating, he forgot to unselect the major to retreat straight to his base, so he was taking damage where the howitzer was falling at the same time. And bless RNG, everything worked out really well in the end.
I mean, that to me was just incredible because Carl could not resist the temptation to get those Panzer IVs. Like, he wanted them down so badly, which is really strange.
Yeah, because he has a Jackson, and that, even if you have a Raketenwerfer on the field, that thing is just like the best Panzer IV counter you can have in any faction, really. I mean,
there was no need to throw as much as he did. I mean, he lost all the riflemen. The major.
I mean, like 70% of his army was wiped because he felt like he basically risked way too much for way too little.
So it's a pretty strong position for you right now. You've, whether intended or not, got great value out of Fortifications Doctrine, which is one we really, really like to see. With Fortifications, just out of interest, you've picked this, I think, solely for the artillery. I mean, do you ever consider using anything else from Fortifications?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to use the S-mines more with that Doctrine, but I find it's better to just use the Incendiary Nade or upgrade STGs with your Volks. But sometimes I try to use the flak emplacements, like maybe on my cutoff or a fuel point early to mid-game, if I want to try to keep it locked down if I have the extra manpower and fuel. But most of the time I'll use the last three abilities, which are the Pack 43, the Howitzer, and the Zeroing RD. The Pack 43 I'll get if my opponent has more resources than I do and he's just pumping out vehicles like no tomorrow, like Shermans everywhere. The Pack 43 is perfect for that because if he doesn't notice it right off the bat and I get it up just in time and I bait the squad right in front of the hedgerow and he's like, oh, I gotta push in all my Shermans, that's almost a guaranteed at least one Sherman kill right there.
Yeah.
And then the Howitzer's nice because if he's spamming a ton of infantry and I'm in range of his base on a good map like this, I can just continually barrage the base and hopefully wipe some units on retreat.
So, just an interesting one here. We saw the Greyhound with that beautiful squad wipe with the canister shot. And,
yeah, that I was like, oh shit. I was like, oh, I've been 5 bolts in here, not like this. Feels bad, babe.
I can imagine it's really annoying. I just want to point out, did you intentionally position the Panzer IV behind the sight blocker here?
Yes, because I was paranoid as balls, as you can see, about that Jackson, which is, you know, going ham on me.
Yep.
But thankfully I wasn't able to finish it off. I was able to escape because I have the flak to cover it, so he's not going to be overly aggressive with his Jackson like he would normally be, which another plus with the flak half-track or flak tier building being placed there. So...
yeah, I mean, that was a great engagement because I mean, it looked like he didn't really know what to do with the Greyhound when he overextended, but the fact that you just weren't taking that damage from the Jackson, and just the attention to detail was like fantastic, and positioning. How do you if there is any method to the madness. Like, how do you actually pinpoint all of this so quickly? Have you learned these points on the map where you can make these kind of pushes with great sight lines, or is this just you being super good?
Well, this is like a combination of me. Like, this is one of my favorite maps, so I understand it really, really well. I know where it's good to flank most of the time, where your opponent might like lay mines, for example, by the cutoffs, etc., and where if you push certain resources or points compared to other ones, you'll usually have a better outcome overall in terms of positioning and timing. So I try to analyze maps as best I can and use that to my advantage, because I'm more of a resource and try to out-camp type of person in terms of my gameplay, because, again, I'm usually aggressive most of the time with my factions.
Just watching this dance of the Panzer IV. They're very risky, Von.
Yeah, I see. At first, I was like, oh, the Jackson's out of position. He's not aiming his turret right at me. So I was like, maybe if I circle around to get it. But then I didn't realize he had HVAP enabled, which, yeah,
it's a killer.
Yep.
Yeah, that is an absolute killer. So, whilst we have a little bit of a... Because you're really ahead on the VPs now, it's kind of, things are picking up, you're very stable, and Carl is actually always fighting back. I mean, I notice you're running Volksgrenadiers down the field that aren't fully healed, because, I guess, well, explain this to me, why are you doing this?
Well, because I need to try to get infantry on the field as best as I can, because I don't want my opponent to be able to come back into the game and have the resources to do so. So I try to just apply pressure as much as I can, as best I can, at any point in the game, really.
So this is just about high aggression then, and...
Yeah, because when your opponent's so pressured, you know, he'll start to sweat, he'll start to make some mistakes, he'll start to like try to do desperate plays, and I try to use that to my advantage.
Okay, it's an interesting point. I mean, a lot of players, I think actually in this game, at one point we see it from Carl, where he just kind of... He just kind of stays in the base and just builds. Do you know what I mean? It's and it was a lot of time on the map that was lost and kind of not recovered. But there we go. Carl has surrendered at this point. So a really good game from you, and you got kind of everything that you said that you wanted to get at the start out. So I just have a couple of questions for you, just for people that are watching. And in the current patch, in this current state, what is your favorite OKW commander, and why is it?
Ooh, well, I can give you two answers for that. In terms of if I want to troll as OKW, I'd say Goliaths would be my favorite. Just because nobody tends to use them this meta, and they can also be a surprise, but as well as a hindrance if you fail with your camoed Goliath, because it's easy to hear and detect. But it's always fun to see that happen, and then your opponent's just like, oh my god. It's like, I never saw this coming. But in terms of meta gameplay and actually, you know, doing my best, I'd say Fortifications is my favorite doctrine overall with OKW, because you just have all that multi-utilization. You've got Artie, you've got the Pack 43, you get the late game if you can save up the muni for it with zeroing Artie, which is huge, especially if your opponent's an infantry spammer. You also have S-Spines, but I don't usually use those because I'm more saving up my muni for other things, and the flak emplacement if you want to add an extra layer of defense if you need that for your cutoff point or your fuel point.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting to hear anyone say that Fortifications is the prime choice for OKW. So I mean, I guess maybe have we rolled back from that state now where special operations Doctrine is kind of the go-to.
Yeah,
commander.
Collins for OKW are just pretty much dead, because by the time you get the Command Panther, it'd be probably worth it just to go for the regular Panther, because A, you could get it faster, and B, like with the Jackson now and SU-85, SU-76, snares, AT guns, the Command Panther is really high risk at the point you get it, which is 12 CPs, because by that time your opponent is ready, and unless you have like Artie to clear out his AT guns that he has placed around the battlefield, or you have enough AT in your arsenal to help counter like a Jackson or whatever, which is really difficult due to that long range advantage it has. you got to be super careful because the Panther will just get cut up like butter if you're not playing to the top of your ability with it.
Yeah, so 12 CP probably puts out a bit later than is efficient now.
Yeah,
So
I mean it's still playable, but it's just
yeah.
it's not the most efficient thing to do.
Okay. So one last question, Von, before we wrap everything up is I've forgotten what it was now. Okay, it was at the moment just some tips maybe for new players or players who are looking to get improve their game and improve their skills. What do you kind of extend to them as your knowledge for why you're so good at what you do?
Universally with all factions or just OKW?
Universally, yeah.
Okay, in
It's up
terms
to
of
you.
like
You can
universal
do both.
gameplay, okay, I'll do both, I guess. I'd say like universally for all factions, the best way to improve your gameplay if you're a new player or a casual player that's trying to get into competitive like 1v1 and 2v2 is save the replays where you lost and then watch those replays and see what you did wrong and see if your strategy needs a modification, like see if certain units you're calling in just aren't working the whole game and you need a different approach, like if you need to lay more mines or get more Rakettenwerfers or Ziz guns or USF guns on the field if your opponent's able to get armor faster than you are. And make sure that you either have a set strategy where you have a commander, which is like one of your favorites that you like to use, but try to find a way in which you can use it most effectively against your opponent and what he's trying to do. So, say if you have a Rifleman Company commander pick as USF and you're playing against your opponent who goes Fallschirmjägers, for example, and it's on a map that's more open, try to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your doctrine. Like, if you know, like, you'll go RE Flame or Spam, for example, with that doctrine. If it's on a more open map, that's probably not a wise idea because you'll be able to suppress you easily, use long range, elite units to snipe you down before you can even get up there to flames. So it'd be better to go more versatile, like bars with riflemen, etc. I'd also recommend watching high level players to see what they do, either in observer mode and try to mimic a little bit, with the factions they play and the factions you like to play that you see that they're playing, and see what they're doing with their faction and see if you can modify your strategy in a way that's similar to theirs so you could do better. You can also watch them on the Twitch platform if you're interested in doing so. There's a cool list of high level streamers that are usually on the CoH2.org website, if anybody's ever heard of that. And usually they'll have a pretty high viewer base for what's going on, unless it's like a tournament or an event that's happening. And I'd say if you're playing OKW specifically, uh, in this current patch form, it's probably best to try to be aggressive as possible early game against all factions. Try to push the cutoff as best you can. Try to get their fuel as best you can, because you have Sturm piles right off the bat compared to other factions where you just have a 4-man infantry section, a conscript, or an RE squad, especially. So you have that advantage where if you hide those Sturms around the flank or around a hedgerow, and he comes around, you can easily bleed him with his initial squads and his first camping squad. And you have the highly efficient Volksgrenadiers, which you can spam out like conscripts, but are a little more effective than cons, especially at medium to long range. And you can use that to push his cutoff as best you can. And then as soon as you have that covered, I'd say find a doctrine you like. Like if you like to spam more infantry as a person, you can go Fallschirmjägers. If you like to have more support weapons on the field, you can go Fortifications. If you like to have more pop out units, you can go Scavenger Doctrine, which also has the Ostwind. If you want to use that instead of the Flag Half Track to try to shoot down planes or counter infantry. But usually it's safe to go straight into Schwer to get the Panzer IV or a Panzer if you're dealing with your opponent having armor on the field already and you need a better armor counter. And you can choose between either going medical group headquarters, which gives you the flak half track and ISGs. Though I wouldn't recommend ISGs most of the time if you're going fortifications, because you have the howitzer instead, which is much more effective and only fuel and 400 manpower. Uh, or if you're more of a mechanized person, I'd say usually it's best to go for Puma first, especially if you're up against USF, which loves to rush armor, since the Panzer II takes longer compared to the Puma, and the Puma is more effective than the Panzer II of dealing with it, especially if you're versus Brits as well with the fast AEC rush, and Soviets if they go fast C70. Um, and also try to utilize your stealth units as best you can with the camo or kitten, like scout ahead with it, try to position it in the back with mines as best you can to stop approaching armor from flanking you and taking out stuff. And just make sure you know you have everything timed correctly, because if you don't time what your call-ins are and what your regular units that you need on the field um, at a certain point in the game, then that could hinder your pushes and plays because your opponent's able to counter what you have because his timing is better. So that's what I would recommend in general.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And whilst you're also talking about that, just pointing out when you do save those replays in your match stats, you've obviously got your build orders that are done time by time, so you can also track if you're doing everything efficiently. You know, get the get the speeds up as good as you can, and also see if you get the tech on the field quicker than your opponents on their build. So lots of interesting tools to use. But yeah, I think that's all we needed to know, Von. And if you want to just plug anything, I think we can find you on www.twitch.tv/VonIvan, which I will put in the description. Have you got anything else that you want to throw people towards?
No, I usually just try to stream as regularly as I can on Twitch, but I definitely highly recommend for those that are interested. You probably already know about it, but Stormless does a fantastic King of the Hill tournament series, as you've probably well known. So I definitely recommend seeing that if you have a Sunday off or you'd like to relax and watch some entertaining CoH2 games at a high level status. See if you can learn some things from that. But if you're interested in more tips as well, there's also, like I said, CoH2.org that you can visit that have replays, strategists, guides, and everything else that you need if you want it.
Yeah, both of those will link in the description as well, because CoH2.org is a great resource. But I think with that, because we've been well out of the game for a long time, VonIvan, congratulations and well played. Sadly, I don't think you're still king, are you?
Well, I mean, I'm still king actually for this
week,
but
okay,
I'm going to be up against some really stiff competition this Sunday. I had some games yesterday against some very hardcore stream snipers who are also part of King of the Hill. DevM, Theo, Nagano, especially Nagano and DevM, they've been going hard at me. So I think they're prepping to have me this Sunday. So I'm trying to figure out how to counter what they're doing right now, because it's tough. It's tough, but
yeah. Well, DevM hasn't signed up yet, but we'll see if that's the case. But yeah, for anyone that's watching, because this will be uploaded on a Saturday, so VonIvan will be playing as King in King of the Hill tomorrow. And if you want to see how he does, and it is at a later date, then feel free to go back and check the episodes. It will be week 9 of season 2. And VonIvan, thank you very much for doing the masterclass.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me for this wonderful cast.
No problem at all. See you next week for the next episode.